Welcome to... I'm going to take that again. I didn't know if it started recording. This is probably going to stay in there.
It's a funny one.
We're going to do it.
Yeah,
Welcome to Hell of a Pitcher. I am Andrew Bartlett, and I am sitting across the internet from my dear friend, Mr. David Hollinshurst. How are you this week today, sir?
Doing real good. Thank you. Doing very well. I'm just sort of reeling over the, that massively talented NBA draft we had yesterday. God, it was just overwhelming, the star power. We were talking about it before coming on air. Just the, wildly underwhelming. If you didn't pick up on my note of sarcasm there.
It wasn't a great year for the NBA draft. We're both pretty big NBA fans, and man, I didn't even know anybody in the draft this year. It was weak.
But you know what? You never know, because you think about it, what was Giannis was drafted 15th. Tyrese Maxey was 27th.
Jokic was the second round.
From the lottery exactly, yeah. So guys come in, they come out of nowhere, they develop. There's hope. It doesn't always have to be highly touted prospects. So we'll see what cultivates from this crop.
Speaking of highly touted prospects,
segue.
There's a great segue into our movie this week. We're doing and completing our Greta Gerwig trilogy with Lady Bird. Lady Bird, 2017. Greta Gerwig's. I guess it's not her debut film. She co-wrote and co-directed a film before this, but this was her first, by herself, wrote everything, directed alone. And we're going to get into Lady Bird discussions and get a sense of what we think about it. If it's a hell of a picture, if Greta Gerwig can go 2 for 3. Did Spielberg, what did we do for Spielberg? No, Spielberg went...
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Spielberg was 2 or 3 because we went, Jaws, Jurassic Park, but then big whiff on the Fablemans. Nolan was 1 for 3. Mega whiff.
But I
Nolan
think,
was 1 for 3 with a strong miss on Following and Oppenheimer as well.
But Gerwig, we were both very close last week to giving the Little Women the hell of a picture nod, but I guess it was mostly we loved the story, but didn't love, not that we didn't love the delivery, but we just didn't think it was worthy of the hell of a picture nod. I that's
I don't know if the movie did anything necessarily to distinguish itself, that the story didn't do for it. That's right. Not to say that it wasn't well executed, that it wasn't a really good movie, because it was well done on all fronts, but there has to be something, I think, a little more to get yourself into the halls of hell of a picture. And that's no knock on the movie or on Gerwig, because, man, she is rapidly becoming one of my favorite filmmakers. Just how good her writing is, how good her direction is. The people she works with, she just seems to have this gravity that brings in talent. And it's a real joy. I'm really enjoying this whole process.
Absolutely. I think that the Barbie really set a high bar for her with respect to our discussion on her. So to get into Lady Bird, Dave, you want to hit us with the rundown? Let's get into it.
I will hit you with the rundown. So Lady Bird is the story of a high school girl and her middle-class family living in Sacramento. We watch as our eponymous lead, whose given name is actually Christine, but gives herself the name Lady Bird, navigates the turbulent waters of family, a Catholic high school, friendship, sexual discovery, and the growingly austere world of college admissions. All the while, her mother tries to keep the family and her own head above water as they struggle to contend with unemployment, the cost of living, and the tumult of raising a teenage daughter whose ambition and work ethic seem to be at odds with one another. As mentioned, Lady Bird was, of course, directed and written by Greta Gerwig. It stars the wickedly talented Saoirse Ronan as Lady Bird McPherson. Laurie Metcalf in just an eye-opening performance. I had no idea how good she was. Laurie Metcalf as the mother, Marion McPherson, Tracy Letts as the father, Larry, Beanie Feldstein as best friend Julie, and our boy Timothée Chalamet as Kyle, the royal D-bag, who I am really looking forward to talking about. Lady Bird was released in 2017. It cost a paltry $10 million and earned a very respectable $79 million. It was met with near ubiquitous acclaim and garnered a host of nominations from different award bodies and festivals. It received 5 Oscar noms, including Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Saoirse Ronan, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Laurie Metcalf, Best Director for Gerwig, Best Original Screenplay again for Gerwig. Sadly, it won none of these. But it may yet win the most coveted award of all, the HOAP, which I think is pretty catchy for our
HOAP, I love it.
The HOAP, yeah, or maybe just the HOAP. Maybe just the HOAP Award. I kind of like that. As a point of interest, the big winners at the Oscars this year included The Shape of Water, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Phantom Thread, 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, and I, Tonya. I, Tonya got a lot of the acting nods, I think, on the female side. So I think that's who Laurie McPherson lost out to, and I can't remember who Saoirse Ronan lost out to.
No. She lost to three Billboards.
Frances McDormand won Best Lead Actress. You're right.
Yes.
So Saoirse lost out to her, but Laurie Metcalf lost out to one of the actors from I, Tonya.
Oh, okay.
I think it was. Yeah. But Margot Robbie also nominated for lead actress for I, Tonya, didn't win. So that's a couple of times that Margot Robbie's been nominated and come up short, which I feel like she's got to get one at some point. She's just continually doing great work.
Yeah, Allison Janney won for I, Tonya.
It's got to happen. Yep.
Okay.
There you have
All
it.
right. All right. Yeah. Nice little rundown.
I want to start us out today. Yeah, thanks, buddy. I do want to start today talking about performances and specifically our lead. Let's not bury the lead. Let's talk about our lead.
Don't bury the lead. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. I don't think I've really seen a more convincing depiction of adolescence with all of its messy beauty than what we get here from Saoirse Ronan. This is not an archetypal character that she's playing, and it would be very easy for it to be one, because that's usually what we get in movies that focus on this stage of life. It's the Breakfast Club paradigm. You know what I mean? You got your nerd, your jock, hot chick, rich kid, poor kid. But here, we just sort of have a kid. You know, she's got artistic leanings. It seems like she has, aspirations of being a writer, but she's not wildly driven by career or education. That's not the focal point. We hear more about where she wants to go to university than what she wants to study about, I think. She's not super popular, but she also seems to have some amount of confidence because she basically inserts herself into the popular group, which takes high school courage for sure. She's a very believable tableau of a teenager who doesn't quite know who she is. And I found the character and her portrayal to be really compelling. What did you think of how she was introduced to us? That opening scene with her and her mom in the car. That was wild.
Well, I think the key to this is the writing. As great as Saoirse Ronan is in this depiction, I mean, she obviously was. She got an Oscar nomination for it. I mean, it's driven by the writing, Gerwig's writing, and I think there's this.
Certainly.
There's this, I guess, like authenticity with her writing. I mean, everything feels real and honest. And, you mentioned the first scene, and it feels like things they would really say. I mean, obviously that is also the writing, but it's also, like you said, it's the performance. This back and forth we get off the hop feels like a conversation that I've had with my mother or father. You probably had with your mother or father. This sort of like, it starts off in a good place, and then next thing you know, you're bickering at each other. Right? It's like this feels authentic and real. Yeah, the shift is, and then it's just overwhelming. I think the only way this kind of can get, this is such a dramatic open to a film. I mean, they're listening to the Grapes of Wrath. They're crying. And then next thing you know,
yeah.
she's literally throwing herself out the window, and it's the hard jump cut.
Yeah.
It's
it's
like,
so
you see, it's great. And you sort of see moments like this in film sometime where it's like, where there's a strong shift in like a character where it's like the character, like I can't really think of something off the top. Like will just like burst into tears about something, or will like their demeanor will fully change, or when you have this dramatic moment in a scene where it's like, oh my god, and you know, her throwing herself out the window, and then you know the mother's reaction when she has that we have that same reaction, right, as the audience. That's why it just works so well. And it's like we've been in that, like you've been like in the car, you're like, I just want to get out of here. Like you were in a fight with somebody in a car. That's, oh wait, she actually is going to jump out of the car. And you know,
she actually just throws herself out the passenger door. It's so great.
The brilliant is like the choice for the next shot. It's shots of like, I think it's "fuck you, mom" on her cast, or like "I hate
something
you, mom,"
like exactly.
Yeah, it's like, and that's the next shot. And
which again is so teenage angst, like, you know, to hate your mom, like, oh god, you're so terrible.
Yeah, and it's great, and it pulls out, and she has the broken arm, and it's like, this is incredible, right? So I think the film starts out with like setting up what we're gonna go through for the rest of the film, right? It's really a relationship movie. It's a relationship to home. It's a relationship to a mother and a daughter. Originally, you know, Gerwig had wrote the script. I think the first few drafts were 350 pages. So if you know,
which is a lot for a screenplay.
Screenplays usually a page is a minute. That's usually how it works out. So, you know, what is that?
Right.
6
120
hours
minutes,
or whatever.
Approximately for for right. Yeah.
3
so standard
hours,
screenplay would be more like in the 120 pages range. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. That's for like 2 hours, and then, you know, so double that, triple that, whatever it is, whatever it was. It was like So, and it was originally called Mothers and Daughters, and it was a lot based on the interesting thing was, you know, she obviously cut it down because your first feature film, solo directing, and you're not going to direct a 3
nobody's giving you that kind of
talking drama about like mothers and daughters.
No.
The but she originally when she, what was I lost my train of thought. It was somewhat autobiographical. All right. So like she sort of, Gerwig has said that the movie is something of a loosely based on her life, but the events never actually happened that happened in the movie. And I thought that was interesting because
I sort of felt that there was a feeling. There was a personal sort of aspect to the feeling of the movie, if not the events. Yeah,
like, which I feel like was really worked in the film. And it's like, she would say that she'd kind of write these, start off with like, oh, you know, me and I'm just kind of pulling a random example, but like, you know, when they stole the communion chips, crackers or whatever.
Right.
It's like that probably started, that actually probably really happened, but like that scene never happened where they're sort of like, you know, talking about it and the girl runs in and whatever. Like there's these sort of moments where she's writing a scene and she's just like, oh yeah, like, or like I went to this party and I was like into this guy or whatever. She said the first scene she wrote for the film was a scene that actually happened, which was the last scene in the film. When she's at a party, or one of the last scenes of the film when she's at a party and she's talking to the guy. And it's like, it's so brilliantly written where it's like, yeah, like, so where are you from? Like, are you from here? She's from Sacramento. He's like, what? And it's like, San Francisco. And he's like, yeah. Oh, she's like, San Francisco. Cool. And you know, that's something I think, I don't know if we've all done that, but like you sort of just maybe trying to fit in, you sort of like pretend to be something you're not, right? And you put on this sort of mask about, you know, whether it's where you're from or what you actually feel about something, just, you know, to want to be accepted. I think this film really does do a phenomenal job of really presenting, like you said, these teen adolescent girls and how they've really evolved or changed or like are trying to figure out how to live in the world. And it does a really amazing job of doing that. Do you think that the relationship, I want to talk about more about her relationship with her mother. I think that's interesting, but I want to touch on the relationship with Julie, her friend.
Yeah, the best friend. Yeah.
So, this is I mentioned the original title was Mothers and Daughters. Did you feel like, but then it's a love story between mothers and daughters, or a mother and a daughter. But then also the secondary love story isn't between her and Larry, or her and Kyle, Lady Berg and Kyle, but it's between the two friends, and sort of how they start off, and they sort of separate a bit, and then they sort of come back. Did you feel like that was depicted, I guess, authentically? Because that's sort of what we're talking about here, that relationship, that friendship relationship.
Absolutely. No. I thought that was just totally sincere. The whole sort of experience that they have together, sort of they're a little isolated, they're not popular kids necessarily. Lady Bird seems to be the dominant of the two, which is often, a reality in friendships, that there is someone who kind of has control to a degree. And then she sort of tries to, like I said earlier, she insinuates herself into the popular group and kind of leaves Julie behind, which is a very real thing that happens to a lot of friends and friend groups and things like that growing up. You take different paths, you fall in with different people. Sometimes people get hurt, and that's very much a thing here. But that scene that you mentioned, where they're eating the communion wafers, and how that didn't really happen, or at least the content of the scene didn't really happen, but the idea may have. But that being said, like that could have been plucked from reality. Just two friends sitting down like that, doing something they're not supposed to be doing, giggling and laughing, and it just dripped with honesty. And I was laughing at that scene quite a bit, and a lot of points throughout this. Just their relationship, I thought, was really moving. And eventually they end up going to prom together. It is sort of this fulfillment of a love story. The two of them dancing, getting the photos taken together. She ditches Kyle, and goes and goes to prom with the person she should be going with, which is her best friend, which is Julie. And that is as true a love as you will find. And you're absolutely right. This is a love story of two layers of daughter and mother, and also two friends.
Now, I do want to mention something, and I don't know if you felt like this with our relationship or our friendship, but I felt like there were sort of similarities. Now, we didn't go to prom together, but
which was a mistake
for you and me.
Which was a mistake. Yeah, I would have had a better time. I'm going to be.
But it's interesting. I think the important people in your life find ways back into your life. You know what I mean? I think for like you and me, I felt like there was a time when you and I were like, that's why I sort of relate to this movie so much. Like we were like inseparable in junior high. I mean, we spent every minute together of like every day almost, and every weekend. Like we mentioned this back in the intro episode. And then in high school, we sort of like, we were still very close friends and good buddies, but we weren't as close as we were, because it was just like your friend group sort of expands, right? And you're sort of, we still had sports together and stuff, but we weren't hanging out as much. We were like, our friend group was growing. But then it's like, and then sort of the same as it led into university, then I moved away, and then you moved away, and we always sort of kept in touch. But then in the past couple of years, it's like we've sort of come back to being very close again. And it was like, it's a very, it's like, I love it. But it's just so, I've sort of had this sort of epiphany while I was watching this. I was like, oh, it's so funny. This relationship is very sort of, I can relate to it, I guess. And I can, and what amazes it.
And I feel like a lot of people would be able to.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a common experience, to have with friends. And so I think that's what makes this movie so inviting to a lot of people, to bring them in, because they can sympathize so directly with that.
And that's what I think. Yeah, like you said, that's what sort of works so well with this. It's like people relate to these characters and they relate to these scenes. I want to jump back into talking about the mother for a second, and I'm curious as to what your feelings were for her, and specifically her relationship to Lady Bird. Do you feel like her depiction was justified, or her ideas were justified, or her thoughts? I think I'm thinking mostly of the scene when she's trying the dress on in the thrift store, and she's like, "Oh my god, I love it." Lady Bird says, she's like, "It's too pink," and it's like,
yeah,
it's just like it's like that's almost more tragic than just, you know what I mean? But the interesting thing about the mother is that she's like, "Do you want me to be truthful, or do you want me to, lie to you?" And she's like, "I do like me," and says the line, "Do you I want you to be the best version of yourself." And Lady Bird says, "Well, what if this is the best version?" And then the next scene, she is sewing the dress. And it's like, wow, that's powerful. And it's like, I don't know if you really caught that. Like, it's like, you have this like sort of combative scene where it's like so sad because she's like, just wants her mother to just be like, "You're amazing, like how you are," or whatever. But she just can't do it. And then conversely, the next scene is her showing her love for her daughter by like fixing something for her, like doing the act of like sewing a dress with time and effort. And so this is what's interesting about the mother. Did you find the relationship was it justified? I guess her mother's just character in general.
Yeah, I mean, justified or not, again, it's very real. And I'm going to keep saying that a lot, but I think it's sort of necessary to say. And it seems like they both struggle with understanding each other's perspective and sort of motivations. Lady Bird doesn't understand why her mom can't just be nice sometimes instead of being honest. Like you said, there is a point where you don't need to be truthful. Sometimes you just need to be supportive and nice.
Yeah.
And she doesn't do that. Like she really hurts her by not just being like, "Yeah, great dress, hon. That's wonderful." And sometimes that's all you need to do. You don't need to fix things. You don't need to try to control or to be devastating as she was. You just need to say the nice thing. And her mom, conversely, doesn't understand Lady Bird's choices. She doesn't understand why she wants to be called Lady Bird. She doesn't understand why she can't appreciate the financial burden that the family is under. I think you get a pretty even split of them both being right and wrong, often simultaneously. And you get these great moments. You talked about it, where one moment they're getting along famously, having a laugh and doing this, and then all of a sudden it breaks into total discord. Yeah. And then a moment later, they'll go right back to getting along, and all in one scene. And I thought that was just so charming, and yet also it could be sad, it could be joyous, and you could experience a lot of things in those mother-daughter scenes. And you brought up the concept of honesty, and I think this movie is a lot about honesty and the way we talk to people. You see her mom able to interact with her coworkers or other people she knows.
Yes.
In the way sometimes that Lady Bird wants her to interact with her, but she doesn't do it. She's able to set aside, this compulsion for honesty when she talks to other people, and she can be totally sweet. And yet she just can't do it where Lady Bird is concerned. And there's this idea, this comment on parenting here, where Lady Bird is meeting with the mother superior at her school, talking about her college admission essay. And she says that she thinks Lady Bird really loves Sacramento, which is surprising because so far in this movie, you've really just heard her talk about how fed up with Sacramento she is. Excuse me, I think I might have said San Francisco. But she has what a lot of people experience, which is sort of this malaise with her hometown. But the mother superior seems to think that she loves Sacramento. She said, "Well, you describe it in such vivid detail." Lady Bird says, "Well, I guess I just pay attention." And the comment or the reply from the mother is, the mother superior, that is, not the biological mother. Well, don't you think love and attention are the same thing? And that's sort of an interesting comment on parenting. Like, parents aren't always going to give you what you want, but they might be giving you what you need. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Did you know? Like, do you notice
Yeah.
that? And did you think that was true? Like, did you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think mostly. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the coworkers, and like we see the mother, like literally gifting this you know, whatever it is for the little her coworker's baby, right? And it's like, oh, I want to see it, and like make sure you like. And she's this loving, caring person, and then she's the honesty and reality with Ladybird. I think, you know, you sort of said you kind of get both sides of it. I think I lean towards more understanding of Ladybird. You know,
Yeah.
I find it tough to justify some of the mother's actions.
Sure.
And I think it's like borders on like cruel. And I don't think it's, but this is what makes her character, I think, so interesting. Like, she
Absolutely
does show things with, like you said, like I mentioned, the dress being fitted, you know, and her obviously they're obviously struggling,
Yeah.
to just like make ends meet, and she's doing double shifts, and she's working hard, and she's, you know, there's a great scene too where they're talking about the father being depressed, and they're talking about money.
Yeah.
And she says the line, you know, something along the lines of like, money doesn't equate happiness, you know, or it's like the amount of money you have doesn't make you happy. And then Ladybird says, well, well, you know, he doesn't have any money, or like, or he's not happy, or whatever. Right. Like, it's sort of like their constant battle between each other is one. It's like they've met each other's match, I guess, especially at this point in Ladybird's life, you know, and it's like she's getting smart enough and independent enough that she knows how to push her mother's buttons, or knows how to, but conversely, the mother does too. I mean, again, one of the more painful scenes in the whole movie is when she says, I want you to tell me how much money I cost you. I'm going to get a job when I get older, and I'm going to pay you back every cent, so I never have to talk to you again. And then the mother says,
because her mom keeps invoking the cost, and she's like, do you have any idea what it costs to raise you on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And she gets out the notepad. She goes, give me a number. Give me a number. It's so great. So sorry, continue.
But yeah, and then the mother's response, I don't think you'll ever find a job that like, or whatever, like implying that she's not smart enough, and it's like, that is brutal. Right. And, but it, like you said, it sort of reduces their combat, I guess, or their combative relationship to financial issues, which I think is common. And I think that's what happened. What do they say about, it's like X amount of, like, some high percentage of divorces are, you know, have to do with like financial burden that families are put on. Right. That's not to say that the parents were divorcing or anything, but like a lot of like strife in families because of money. And that's such an important part of this story, and for Ladybird in general. Like, she's aside from like the idea of her home in Sacramento, but as like her being done with just the place, like this idea that life is happening out there, right? Life is happening where you're not, especially in your home, right? Like, this is my hometown. Everything's like, nothing's happening here. Like, life, I feel like a lot of people go through this. A lot of people, especially if you come from a smaller place, you're like, have this idea that you go to a big place or go to somewhere else to, you know, that's where all the exciting things happen. But again, when you reduce it to like financial issues, you know, that's for Ladybird, aside from the home, it's like, that's sort of this driving force with her. She's embarrassed to tell the popular girl in school where she
Yeah.
got where she lives. She tells Larry she lives on the wrong side of the tracks, right? So there's this constant idea of worrying what she's gonna what the financial burden is of of her life. But I want to get in. Speaking of Larry, I want to get into the kind of the Larry and the Kyle characters, and I want to sort of we're talking about the honesty of the film, the reality of the film, but I sort of want to talk about those relationships that she creates. The romantic relationships in the film. The film takes place in 2002, right? You sort of kind of forget that. I was going to go back and look. So this was made in 2017? I think we said,
yep.
Yeah, 2017. So this was, takes place 15 years earlier. Like, do we think, I was just trying to think about movies that like took place, like what's like Back to the Future, where he went back, how many years ago? This is like, a bit of a, like, doesn't really make sense to what we're talking about. I'm just curious as to like, it seems that 2002 and 2017, like this could have taken place either time. The only difference was that like there was
they're not starkly different. It's not like you're changing eras where there's a tectonic shift in fashion or culture or technology or anything like that. You sort of get cues from the cell phones that they have, the fact that she doesn't have a cell phone. They also do talk about 9/11 on a couple of occasions. It sort of hangs over the film in an interesting way that I think we can get into later. But it does sort of serve at the very least to establish time and the temporal aspect of the setting.
The idea that and in 2002 it's like there were this is mostly with the Larry character. People weren't out then, like in high, like that's when we graduated. She's essentially our age.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like we graduated in 2002
right.
from high school, and there might have been one or two people that were out in our high school, but it was not a common thing, obviously.
No,
there's still
not.
especially a lot of places in the States, right? So this storyline sort of works with him being like, in the closet, and I feel like her romantic relationships are really depicted in again, I use the word authentic, but like in a real way. Like I feel like we have these relationships. Yeah, not everybody dates somebody that's in the closet, but like the Kyle character as well.
Probably happens more than people know, though. That's the thing about the closet. It's
especially that time, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Kyle character, it's like these depictions of people in our youth and adolescence. That's sort of like let's just talk about this. Like let's talk about the Timothée Chalamet Kyle character. And like, do you feel like his depiction feels like we've all known somebody like that in our life? Like,
oh my God,
we've known.
Oh my God, yes.
So, even if the funny thing is, Greta Gerwig in an interview said people think that she's Lady Bird. And like, while that is true, she's like, I actually have more in common with Kyle. Which is so funny.
That's funny,
and that's like.
That's funny because like one of my fears watching this was that I can be a Kyle. My one of my deepest fears is that like, oh God, am I Kyle sometimes? Oh man, I don't want to be Kyle. Oh God, but I think I can be from time to time.
It's absolutely
super crappy, but I think I can.
But I mean, we know that guy that rolls his own cigarettes, that reads pompous history.
Did it for a time.
Yeah, because you don't want, but like
affectation.
I know, but then it's like this facade too, right? Like people are playing the authenticity of their character, but also the character is playing somebody. Everybody's sort of playing this or all the kids in it at least are playing sort of like projections of what they want to be, right? Larry is in the closet.
Yes.
Kyle is like, he pretends to be this like socialist, like whatever, how pompous like liberal sort of thing, but in reality is he's mostly, he's a rich kid. That, you know what I mean? Like he goes to a private school, he drives his own car. He's like, the reason
he's also mostly just doing it to get laid. I think all of this is something he has affected.
Exactly.
It's an air that he is putting on to craft an image for himself. And again, this goes back to the concept of honesty that we've touched on a lot, and the way we talk to people and the way we project ourselves and what that says about us. And I think about the way we regard people too. And I think he thinks more of himself than he does of most other people, and that's very clear in the way he talks. Like you say, he's rolling his own cigarettes. He's reading a book at a party. He's always carrying that same book around. It's also, the book he carries is A People's History of the United States, which I have never read, but from what I looked into it and from what I gathered, is exactly the kind of book that a young sort of intellectual might read and then lecture people about there afterwards and just become totally didactic over. And this is who this guy is. He is the didactic, sort of uneducated but self-important kind of young liberal that sort of ruins liberalism for a lot of us. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're just like, he's exhausting to be around. He's constantly making people feel bad for stuff that they do. Like there's that scene where it's just after they've had sex for the first time, and Lady Bird finds out that it wasn't his first time, and she's kind of upset about that because the impression he had given her, which he 100% did, was that he was a virgin as well, and he denies that he ever said that. He totally gaslights her, and then she's upset. He trivializes her feelings by talking about the Iraq War, and it's just like, dude, I know that there's a war going on, but can I not just feel bad for what's happening to me right now? Because yes, it's good to have perspective. There are worse things in the world, but the worst pain is the pain you know. Your own pain is all you can really understand. That's what always feels the most real because you're experiencing it. And yes, we all should have some perspective and understand our privilege from time to time. But you don't always need somebody reminding you of these things. Sometimes, again, this goes back to sort of the same thing. You just need someone to be nice to you. You don't need someone to be honest and pompous as he is, reminding you of the Iraq War when you're pissed off about a personal, intimate issue. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to get upset about your petty, selfish stuff sometimes. You need that. We all need that. And yeah, oh man, the Chalamet character is so awesome. I love the way he plays it. He's one of my favorite actors going today. I can't, every time I see him in something, I'm just like, Chalamet rocks, man. Like, not many people.
He's great. He has a very
play this character. Yeah, and yet also a very lovable one too. Like, I mean, he's disarmingly handsome. But can also have that sneer. Can also be very sneering and loathsome, which he is in this movie. He's incredibly loathsome.
I mean, and another
yet, Paul Atreides, I love him. I think he's so he's so someone you want to root for. So kudos to Chalamet.
Yeah, Chalamet is awesome in this, and I love, another brilliant part of the writing. I mean, he's not even in this scene, but she's waiting to go to prom and honks the horn. Like, it's just such it's such a juvenile thing, and it's like you mentioned, like, he's stupid. He's like, he's like not educated, and it's like, because if you were smart enough at all, or had any sort of like goodness, you would get out of the car and walk to the door and ring the doorbell.
If you had any sense of class, like, my God, man,
it's
prom,
exactly.
There's a ceremonial aspect to this. You're supposed to go up and yes, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
The dad says you're not going to go with somebody that honks a horn, and this goes back to,
you're not going to go with a honk guy, are you?
Yeah, she's like, yeah, I think I am. Like, she is a bit she's a bit delusional, but she also, I think she just knows, like, she also knows, like, he's probably, like, this is after they've had sex, right? Like, this is, she knows he's a dick. Like, she's sort of, but she's sort of fine with it. Cause I think that's when we're kids, that's sort of how we work sometimes. We're like,
Well, this is it. She's a kid, and she's going to make mistakes. And the movie allows her. I love that the character has the agency to make mistakes. And that's really important, I think, to be like, yeah, I know this is wrong. I know he's a dick, but he's cute, and he plays in a band, and it's prom. I kind of just want someone who looks good in photos, I feel, is sort of like almost the justification. Or also just the opportunity to fool around and make a mistake, like you should when you're 17 years old. So, yeah, I absolutely loved that scene.
We talked about, I mentioned the Fabelmans earlier, and it's like it's sort of elicited some thoughts of the Fabelmans and like the character, her character, the girlfriend character in that, when she's sort of like, oh, they're like, we're going to prom, but we're going to break up after, sort of thing. It's like, this isn't right. I'm not going to move away with you. Like, that's stupid. And this is sort of, but again, this felt more authentic because we were seeing it from Lady Bird's point of view. Right. And it was like, we've seen her make the bad decision, and like, she knows what she's like. We're like, okay, like we've all dated people where like, this is a terrible idea. Like, where we've all been, and like, what am I doing here? Like, this is stupid. I know I'm going to get,
or like at the end when she goes to that party and drinks herself to the point of being sick. Again, a mistake. Yeah. But one we've all made.
But one we've all made. And it's like, that's part of growing up. I thought getting back to a real powerful scene I wanted to bring up was when they're dropping her at the airport and the mother sort of, I mean, I feel like this, you feel like in when somebody gets an Oscar nomination and they have this moment of, it's like you submit this one scene that like, this is the scene that's, I'm submitting to the Academy because I want to be nominated. It's like that scene is the driving scene of her driving the car. Sure. So she drops her off and Lady Bird says, aren't you going to come with me? Or like, I'm leaving. And she's like, I can't even remember what she says. She's like, well, it's like, your father will bring you in. It's busy or whatever.
Yeah. And she says she can't because they don't even allow you now because of 9/11. You're not allowed to go to the gate anymore. Yeah. It's just like this flimsy, terrible excuse for not getting out of the car.
Exactly. And she sort of the drive away and then the looping around the airport sort of thing. And then not realizing, but just like that is so powerful. And she's just like times it perfectly. That one shot, and then she gets out and runs, and like that loving moment between the husband and wife, where it's like he's just comforting her and says, she'll be back. She'll be back. And it's like the dad knows.
But the sense of like the desperation though in Laurie Metcalf when she, like you say, when she's driving around and she realizes she has to get back, and just the urgency and the realization that she's done something terrible. And she's already in the pangs of regret, and that is, like you say, there's your submission to the Academy. Now, granted, I think she's incredibly strong throughout this whole movie, and there's so many parts that you could look at and be like, yeah, that's an Oscar clip. That's an Oscar clip right there. So you really can't say enough about how good she is.
And what, like, as soon as I saw her, I was like, is that the aunt from Roseanne?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was like, I haven't seen her in anything in forever.
Since Roseanne.
Since Roseanne. There's Gerwig has.
Where is Roseanne now? How's she doing? You know what I think? What's she in lately?
Let's not even go there.
No, we won't.
Gerwig's ability. We both can agree. I think that her strong point is her writing. Right, she writes these. All three of her movies from like that we've talked about, Little Women, Barbie, and now Lady Bird, they all have this, like, the writing just seems to pop off the page. It feels like I could sit down and read this script and just be like enamored with it because it just seems so authentic and real and truthful. I think one thing she does really great here, and I think this translates, and it's like she almost gets better and better with Little Women, and especially with Barbie, is like she makes just interesting choices with respect to shooting style, with respect to editing, with costume production design, makeup. Like the makeup for Lady Bird, like she didn't have any makeup on, and you could kind of see her acne.
Yeah,
like she had acne scar, and it's like this is like very subtle thing, but it's like we're not covering that up. She's a kid. She's a teenager. This is who she is.
Yes.
All the shots in
Yes.
it was very portraiture, like very still. She wanted all the shots to feel like still images to evoke memory-like imagery in her shots, right? So it's like how we remember things, how we remember like stories, how we remember like, oh man, remember when we went and did this thing together, we went to this party, or I like lost my virginity, or I like graduate at prom. You kind of have you have these moments, like you don't have this like, and like very few, there was like no handheld shots in it. It was like when the camera did any moving, it was very like, it was like a panning or like very subtle movements. But most of it was sort of like locked off shots. And this is kind of like her shooting style. And then the same with the editing, you know, I mentioned it, like the jump cut to the arm, and a lot of these things, it supports her writing style. So it's like, if she's like an A+ writer, it's like she's not making any poor decisions on the other ideas, right? The other shooting styles, editing, production design, all these other things that she's sort of overseen as a director. And I think this is what kind of like really starts putting her in a class of her own. I know this was her first film, but like I said, she's not making any like bad decisions. When we see with Little Women, she's sort of making these like, all right, the production design is good, the editing is strong, the, you know, shooting style is interesting, but it's not like the strongest style. It's not the strongest aspect of her as a director. It's like the writing really is. So I feel like for you, were there other through lines for Little Women and maybe even into Barbie? Because then in Barbie, I think we see the best of it all. Like we see these interesting, aesthetics, this interesting production design, and maybe the story lends itself a bit to that. But did you think there were through lines to her other work?
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on it earlier, talking about the obstacle that finance presents in this, and that's a huge component of Little Women too. Not so much in Barbie, but there is certainly still, well, there are obstacles of a similar nature in Barbie, but I thought it was more pronounced this through to Little Women. And I feel like the movie is sort of asking a question, and it's asking us, is it okay to want things? Maybe things that you don't really need, like pretty dresses and big houses and things like that. And you hear Emma Watson's character talk about it in Little Women, and she really laments the absence of things in her life when she marries for love as opposed to money. And even before she's married, when you see the decline financially of the March family, and you hear her sort of being kind of sorrowful about not having the nice things, the decorations, all the sort of the gilding of life. And I feel like there's something that Gerwig tells us in both these movies, that you're forgiven for that. It's okay to want these things. Materialism, yes, is not a good thing overall, but it's okay. You're not a bad person because you want a bigger house or a nice dress. And you see it with Julie when they're walking home from school. They walk through the nice neighborhood, and they look at the nice houses that they can't afford, that their families could never live in. The one that Lady Bird pretends she lives in. And then with her and her mom, when they have one of their moments of reconciliation after a fight, she says, you want to go to our favorite Sunday activity? And their favorite Sunday activity is to go to open houses and pretend that they're house hunting. And so that they can walk through these houses and act like they could afford it and experience being in these homes just for an hour.
Yeah.
Just for an hour. And I think both of these movies are trying to tell us that it's okay to be a little childish and materialistic. It's okay. Do you think that it's offering you sort of that absolution? Like, is it giving you permission to be a little silly about things and telling you that it's okay?
Yeah, it's I think it certainly is. And I think it's a part of, from Lady Bird's perspective, it's a part of growing up, right? It's part of, we mentioned it earlier, it's like, it's okay to want to go away and go to other schools or like experience other places. And I think,
romancing things that you don't know.
Exactly. But that's what I think is so powerful about those scenes where she arrives in in New York, and she goes to the party, and she ends up sort of like in the hospital, like drunk, and like, you know, she goes to the church, and like she's like sitting, she goes to church there, and it's like this really like profound moment of like, wow, like this like I don't think it's like, maybe life at home isn't so bad. It's like, I don't think it's like that. I think it's more so like, oh, you know, maybe the thing that I wanted, or the things that I want, aren't always going to be how it turns out, or always going to be what I expect it to be. Right. You romance like what you don't know. And, I think for Lady Bird, yeah, like, yeah, I think it's more, it's not like an idea of like wanting to fit in or something, even with her relationship to like the popular kids in school. I think it's her just trying to make her way and try to figure it out, and trying to like,
Sure.
get like, cause she doesn't have what she wants right now, you know? And I think the majority of kids, and that's adolescents, don't have what they want. They're trying to figure out what they want.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, and it's hard sometimes. You know, it's really hard.
But again, I think the movie is saying that it's okay. We all feel that way. We all want a little more than we have. It's all right. You know, there's a nice sense of, yeah, it's almost this religious kind of penance. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of, you're being absolved of the sin that we're all guilty of. And I thought that was a really nice little sort of statement, if it can be called that, from the movie, or at least a nice thought.
So, no, I agree completely. You know, is there anything that comes to mind when we're talking about this? Because we both seem to be praising the film and a lot of aspects of the film. Is there anything that didn't quite work for you before we kind of get into our final thoughts on the film? Like, is there anything
honestly,
they felt?
Yeah, honestly,
for me, I think you started off the conversation and you mentioned that like you felt this film more than almost any other film you've seen really depicted high school, like almost better. I think there's a few other films that come to mind that I would sort of put on the same. I think Superbad does. But that's more obviously with definitely the comedic aspect, but I think Superbad really does. But I also think that, this sort of is an elitism. Dazed and Confused, maybe. Like you said, the Breakfast Club feels like Ferris Bueller. These are,
they're almost apocryphal.
Can't hardly,
you know what I mean? Like it's sort of, it's not a really accurate cross section. Like it's sort of a generalization of a cross section of high school, which this movie strays away from. This is a very, very, very much more nuanced take than anything like that. So yeah, I would put this more like Superbad. You struck the nail on the head there. That is a really apt comparison.
Yeah, and then the Gerwig has also said that she was hoping to create something sort of similar to Boyhood. I don't know if you've ever seen Boyhood. Richard Linklater's
Have
Boyhood.
not. No.
It won Best Picture. It was sort of shot over, God, how many years? 15 years, 20 years.
Oh,
or something?
Yeah, that's right. I remember hearing about that with Ethan.
Ethan Hawke is in it. And,
I was going to say Ethan Hunt.
Yeah, it's
the Tom Cruise character from Mission Impossible.
Yeah, Mission Impossible.
That'd be a different picture.
Whatever. It's sort of like she sort of wanted. Boyhood would be interesting to do, especially as like
Ethan Hunt as like as like an adolescent and just like running in nice suits all the time. He's still wearing designer suits and running his ass off.
See, that's interesting. Seeing like a James Bond or Ethan Hunt or one of these, like, let's see them as in adolescents. Let's like, what would their lives?
I think that's what the Kingsman gives you. Isn't that Kingsman? I feel like that's what that is basically.
Right.
It's let's get some sexy teenagers and have them be spies. It's a 4-quadrant picture. You're really bringing in everybody there.
That's I didn't love Kingsman, but anyways, I digress. So
another podcast.
Another podcast. We're almost an hour in. I feel like we could talk about this movie for another hour. But
we could do a couple episodes. It was fabulous.
This movie is pretty. I mean, there's a lot of things we didn't even touch on that but the brother character, I don't know. Again, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the relationship she has with Julie. And anyway, with all this being said, we've talked about the movie. We talked about 3 Gerwig movies. I have to know, for you, will you turn your key for Lady Bird and make it a hell of a picture?
Yeah, I'm not. They were denied the Oscar. I will not deny them the hope. I love this movie. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, you asked me if there was anything that didn't work. This was the first time I saw it. I only got a chance to watch it once before we talked. So I feel like a lot of blemishes come out on the second watch. So maybe there's things that don't work for me, and I'll find them in the future. But even still, a first watch of this movie was a really wonderful experience. Really wonderful. It was moving. It was funny as hell. It was smart. It was just, the performances were just unbelievable. There's so much to love in this. And yeah, I will present Greta Gerwig gladly with the HOAP Award. And Saoirse Ronan,
well, you still
and Laurie Metcalf and Timothy Chalamet. Give it to them all. I'll give it. There's a host of hopes.
You still need me to turn my key.
That's true. I do. I will give them half the award. Then I will bisect the award with a bandsaw and.
Well, you don't have to do that because I'm giving it the hope.
All right.
Gerwig goes 2 for 3. We're back in it. Ooh. I tell you, I watched this movie a few years ago. But it was like, I watched it a year or 2 after it came out. Again, I sort of I didn't even know who Greta Gerwig was at this point. And I sort of eventually saw it. I was like, oh, I've heard this got nominations. I watched it and I was like, man, this is an amazing movie. And I loved it the first time around. I hadn't watched it since. And I bought it for this podcast and I watched it. And I was like, it's one of those movies I wanted to watch immediately again. Like, this movie is so good. It has so many great scenes, great dialogue. I love this movie, and it's one I can revisit. One thing I think is again a good indication of a very strong writer is, like, we quoted. I hadn't seen the movie in years. You've never seen it. We were able to quote like dialogue in the movie, like almost verbatim. Like, this is the indication of a strong film and strong writing, that you're creating dialogue and scenes that, like, I can recite and I remember them like perfectly. Now, granted, I only watched it the other day, but still, it's like, that's an amazing accomplishment, I think, as a filmmaker, to be able to.
It leaves a mark. So this movie leaves a mark, and yeah, you like you said it perfectly. You remember this movie in these moments.
So I encourage our audience, if you've made it this far in the podcast, you haven't seen this film, which I find, I don't know why you would be listening to this without listening to the movie, because we spoil so much of it. But
good conversation. You
need to watch this movie, and this makes me excited for where Gerwig is going to go. I know we sort of mentioned early on that back in the Barbie episode that she's writing Snow White, I think. But I'm interested to see what she's going to direct next. And I can't wait.
I'm excited to see everything that she does.
I will suggest to you, worth watching would be Frances Ha, which was directed by Noah Baumbach. She acts in it and she co-wrote it. And when I watched it, I remember loving it, and it was an amazing movie. So if you want some more Gerwig in your life, hit that up, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So that brings us to a conclusion on Gerwig, Greta Gerwig, her trilogy. She goes 2 for 3, an impactful 2 for 3. I don't think we ever even had to debate. The Little Women was teetering on, and maybe in the future, when she does a couple more movies, maybe we'll revisit Little Women, and maybe that'll become a hell of a picture. There's nothing stopping films from not being a hell of a picture to potentially being one in the future.
No, that's right.
Films age over time differently. So, But Dave, do you want to tell our audience what we're going to be hopping into next? We have a fun couple of films. What are we doing?
Yeah, we're going to take a departure from what we've been doing. We've started with a directorial perspective and doing trilogies of each director in turn. So we're going to deviate from that. And as we are coming into summer, we thought the summer popcorn flick, the blockbuster, would be an interesting place to go. And yeah, this is going to be different. And I'm excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to start next week with our
specifically the 90s.
Oh yeah, that's
90s,
right. Yeah, I forgot that
90s summer
little qualifying factor. Yeah, 90s summer. So that's that's
we
obviously
grew
special
up,
to us. That is prime time. Yeah, this is when we were sort of real target demographic for a lot of these movies that we're going to talk about. And we're going to lead with one that I certainly owned on VHS and watched the crap out of.
As did I.
I guess you probably did too. Yeah. And it is the Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, Judd Hirsch, Bill Pullman, friggin' masterpiece, Independence Day. We're coming in hot. ID4. Man, I can't wait. This is a movie. This is an oft quoted movie among you and I and others in our friend group.
Can't wait for this one,
man. I can't wait. Yeah.
The fun thing about this stuff is, we're kind of moving away from the directors. We're going to more of a genre, the action, the 90s summer blockbusters. And the interesting thing I'll say about these specific films is they're not all critically acclaimed, right?
No, far from it.
The one thing we kind of the one thing we did with all the movies we've sort of done up until this point, they've all been pretty much like high Rotten Tomatoes score or like positively reviewed for the most part.
Yes.
But like some of these are not going to be, on paper, not great. But to us, could they still become a hell of a picture? I think that's the interesting question. And like, where does nostalgia fit in for us for a hell of a picture? Where does, like, where does a movie that you hold reverence that might not actually be a well-made film, can that still be a hell of a picture? I think we're going to find that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm excited to have that conversation. That's gonna be a barrel of laughs. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so rewatch Independence Day, the first one. I know there's been there's been a remake, I think, and maybe a sequel or something. Either way, Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum.
Who the hell knows? Yeah.
Roland Emmerich directed it, right? I think so. Pretty sure.
I think so, man. That's a good pull. I did not have that one on the tip of my tongue, but it does sound right.
Yeah, I'm like 99% sure it was Roland Emmerich, which is, there you go, Roland Emmerich, who's done some gems, who's still making movies, and he did the Resurgence.
Oh yeah,
he's not dead yet.
The sequel, but the franchise is after that movie. I think safe to say. Man,
he's made some duds though, buddy. He's made some duds. All right, so with that being said, we're all done with Gerwig and on to some summer blockbusters next week. So for David Hollingsworth, I am Andrew Bartlett, and we will see you all next week on Hell of a Picture.